Warning: the following program may contain material not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
The borders of space and time have opened once again. And transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's time once again for Let's Find Out with Diego. The universe is waiting for you. Wake up and remember.
On this episode of Let's Find Out, our guest had their first encounter at the age of 2, growing up with shadow beings. He has a story that will challenge everything you think you know about the spiritual world. He'll share experiences about the ability to channel spirits and the unique gift of sensing when spirits are near. Plus, we'll dive into his new book, Awakening: My Journey into the Paranormal. All this plus more. Please welcome our good friend, paranormal author and podcaster, Michael Kopf. Michael, my friend, welcome back to Let's Find Out. It's been too long, man.
It has, and thank you for having me back on. And wow, after that intro, I'm like, I found myself for a second looking around and going, "Who's he introducing?"
No, it's like a movie trailer, man. I'm bringing you in, man, and we're gonna be off to the races here with. And I'm so happy that you have a new book coming out, as I said, Awakening: My Journey into the Paranormal. And as I'm looking through the notes, there are some things you and I share in common. And I think and I know it's between both of us because we're both podcasters and you do other shows as well. It might be hundreds of interviews ago since you and I had a conversation, but I think we had similar childhoods in a way at the age of 2 that I think, at least for me at least, that's when I started having my experiences, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Now, recently, over the summer, now we're in the fall, year's almost over. You emceed an event of a friend of ours down in Florida, and he was the one behind the Disclosure Now conference in Florida over the summer. How did that go?
That was an amazing experience, actually, and I was so grateful to be emceeing the small stage for the 2025 Full Disclosure Now conference. And I met so many interesting speakers and made so many friends. And one of the things that was truly amazing about it too is, as a podcaster, we look at people across the screen and we have, kind of friendships with, but we've never met. And so I was fortunate at this conference to a lot of people that have been on my show were there. And so it was like I got to finally meet them face to face and hang out and spend some time just chilling out with them. And it was a really interesting experience. And I actually had 3 guests come on my show that I met at the conference. And so that was kind of cool too, was to make new connections. And the funny part about it is, doing what we do, we are so aware of everything around us and, so many things. It amazed me going through this process and introducing and listening to the speakers that quite a few of them, I was sitting there jaw dropped, how have I not heard of this or put this together before? Or it's just the way it's being presented right now. It's making some sense. And I'm I was so glad I wasn't on screen, because I'd be going, just keep talking. I'm gone. Don't.
No, and I get it now. You probably have the same experience too. Now, there's been times where I do vendor events and to promote the podcast and things like that. And as you do each event, every once in a while, you'll get at least 2 or 3 people that'll come on your show. And down the line, pretty much every event you go to, it's there's a lot of people here that I know. Is a great feeling. Now, going on that, I've had times where complete strangers just come up to the booth and then try to figure out what you're all about. Then they start telling you their stories about their personal encounters. Have you had that as experience as well?
Well, I haven't vendored yet for the show, but I have made appearances at events, and when I meet someone that I know, they're like, "Oh, you got to meet my friend. He's, a paranormal investigator, or he's a podcaster." And everyone's like, "That's really cool." But every once in a while, I'll just look at something and somebody will be like, "Oh, I'd love to know, more about that and stuff." And I'm like, "Oh, well, as a paranormal investigator, I can, maybe help you with that." And their face will light up and they're like, "You're a what?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a paranormal investigator." And it's kind of a funny feeling because it's like you feel like you're being recognized, but you're not being recognized. And just the way you're able to light up and help this person like gain more awareness or gain interest into the field is a really cool feeling. And to me, it's more cool than talking on the podcast and people coming up and saying, "Hey, I seen your show." And it's like, yeah. And I do have a funny story though about someone being recognized from my podcast. And that was a friend of mine went to a paranormal event and somebody walked up to her and goes, "You seem familiar. I think I know you." And she goes, "Really? Well," and she goes, "I think we have someone in common." And I was like, and she's telling me how this was all unfolding. And I forget all the details, but in the end, she goes, "Well, I was on Michael's podcast." And she goes, "That's it. That's where I know you from." And I was like, I started laughing and I was like, "You got recognized from being on my show?" And she goes, "Yeah." I was like, "Well, that's kind of cool."
That's pretty cool. Now, with your shows now, you say you have what, 3 of them, right? Or 2 active, 1 kind of in and out?
So I host 2 shows. I co-host 2 shows. So there's actually 4 now that I'm a part of. And 2 we're kind of going through some stuff, and so we kind of put it on hiatus because life takes priority. And anybody who knows me and has been a guest on my show is I will tell you adamantly, life and family comes first. So
Mhm.
I'm like the last person to be, judging anything. But I have said to guests, even going, if you're sick the day of, I don't care, that there's short notice, and I would prefer more notice, but I'm not faulting you for getting sick. And so I'm like, we can reschedule. And the more time I get, the better. But, I'm not going to fault you for trying to make the show, and I appreciate that. But yeah, I'm more of the opinion of your health as the guest takes priority to the show. Because I can always do a show myself or postpone it. That's not a major deal. I just don't ever want a guest to feel like they have to come on sick because we agreed to a certain time and a certain date. And I'm like, most podcasters, I know you're not that way, but there are some out there that I know that are like that, and I'm more flexible. So keep that in mind if you want to be on my show or Diego's. We're more of the flexible hosts.
Yeah, that's very true. I've had some cancel like right before we start, and that's fine by me because, as you said, your health and family is more important to coming on a podcast, and we can always reschedule. That's the beauty of it because none of us are on any kind of timeline really. and we have that flexibility. And at the same time, we want to get these people's stories out as well. But I know about you, but sometimes our network's pretty big. So there's been times where, I know we're getting off topic, and I apologize, my friend, but where we can just text a friend, hey, man, you want to come on short notice? Like, oh, yeah, I'll come on. And then, boom, you got them on.
Yeah, I was told about that this year, and I was like, I wish somebody had told me about that before to make that list, because that is a godsend list. And the beauty of that list, too, though, is as the host, we have a responsibility to ourselves and our health and well-being, too, to saying, yeah, I know I can reach out to this person and we can do the show in 5 minutes, have it all set up, good to go. I can fix everything image-wise, promotional-wise later.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can sit there and say, I need a break. I need a rest. Let's just postpone and push it off. And having that freedom is so important, because I know when I've been dog tired and had a guest cancel and had to come on, I was like, I feel myself drudging through, and I'm like, I know if I'm feeling this, it's got to be coming through on the screen, and it's going to make this a bad episode. So it's better to not do it.
Right. I had one time I did an episode. It was on video, and I had the flu that night, and I had somebody co-hosted with me. They wound up carrying most of the show. Most of the stuff is I was trying to get myself off camera from coughing. I hit that mute button just to make sure everything goes smoothly. But God bless him for helping out on that. So now let's move on to something, because I would not surprised, because you're a man of many talents, that I was happy to see that you written a new book, Awakening My Journey into the Paranormal. And as I said earlier, and I love the cover, by the way, and we're going to talk about the cover here in a little bit. I was saying that you and I share some similar type of life experiences where things started at a very young age. I can say about age 2 or 3. Same thing with you. Going back to that time, Awakening is going to give us a deeper look into your paranormal journey. Let's start from the very beginning. You mentioned having your first encounter, of course, talked about the age of 2. Can you paint a picture for us of what was that like?
Sure. So imagine being 2 years old. It's winter time, and it's the 1980s time frame. So this was the age of, if you remember the movies, if you weren't alive then, you had those really poofy winter outfits that almost made you look like a star. So I'm all bundled up for the winter, and we're upstairs on the second floor, and my mom had placed a board over this vent opening while they were doing some work. Well, somehow something moved the board, and I just realized this is audio only, and I did air quotes, so I'm going to back up a second for the sake of those watching. And when I said moved the board, that was in the air quotes, so that's what I'm talking about. But so moving on, I go and I'm leaning over looking at the vent opening, and something grabs me and I start to fall down the vent opening, and it goes all the way to the concrete basement. So the picture is, free falling, second floor, first floor, then basement. I get up, no bruises, no broken bones, pretty much just kind of brush it off, and I'm like, yeah. It's not until later that I have unlocked pieces of the memories of that event where I find out, yeah, something pulled me into the vent, and
What?
something was grabbed me, but another being came and pulled me away from them, and we talked about future, what's going to happen, outline, how things are going to unfold, reinsert me, and I feel like I was reinserted in a certain spot in the free fall because my eyebrow got cut by a wire. That's the only mark I ever had from this experience.
To this day, you still have it.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so it's like a constant reminder of this event. And, and to me, I was like, that was just an amazing story, to have these beings and all this interaction. And somebody goes up to me and says, well, actually, the impressive thing is you could understand the being. And I was like, never thought about it. But yeah, you're right.
And is that the only mark you've had your whole life?
The only mark from that experience, yes. Now, I have had, when I was in, I think it was high school, or I might have graduated and been in starting college, I went over my birthday with my best friend, and this is the part of the story I can't explain because it wasn't my part, but he brought his ex-girlfriend and current girlfriend on the trip. And so I was like, that was awkward in itself, but
Absolutely.
we thought we would mess with the girls being in their tent next to ours, and we started playing like wolf calls and wolf howling and stuff, and being like, oh, I think there's wolves out there, seeing if we could like rile them up. And the next morning when I opened the tent and looked out, there actually were wolf prints around the campsite. And I was like, there were actually wolves out there. And they all laugh and they go, ha ha, you're funny. I was like, no, you can see their paw prints right here. And they were like, what? And I was like, yeah. And so I went off on my own to go up the side of this hill where we were at our mountain. I don't know how the determination gets classified, but I'm going up the side, and this is where it gets interesting because I don't know if I'm actually seeing what I'm seeing or if I'm seeing like apparition style. But there's a wolf with cubs sitting, in this area, and I feel drawn to come closer. And I'm like, okay. And so I'm walking towards the wolves, and the mom's not getting, upset. So I'm thinking, okay, this is okay. And all of a sudden, I see out of the corner of my eye this black wolf appear. And he's obviously the alpha. And he comes charging at me. And I'm like, whoa. I thought I had permission. I'll back off. No problem. And he jumps into my stomach area. And notice I said jumps in because he never went through me. And I had what looked like scratch marks on my stomach, and I have a bit of a stomach, so I didn't know if, this was, a mark that I just never noticed before or something. So when I was with the massage therapist, I asked him, what do these look like? And he goes, well, I can tell you, they're not stretch marks because I've never seen stretch marks like that, but they're not scars either, but they are definitely unique. And so to me, I feel like that's the mark of the wolf spirit in me.
That's amazing. And talking about the wolf spirit in you, is there any background in your family that would probably bring that into you? Do you have any history in the United States or in your religion or culture that would bond you with that?
Well, growing up metaphysical, I know of spirit totems and spirit animals or spirit beings that are around, and I always felt kin to like the wolf, eagle, and bear. And I used to laugh with my mom because she would say, "Well, we don't know anything about this," and I could look it up on the internet real quick and find it. And I was like, "Well, the internet's on the web. Wolf, eagle, bear, web." I was like, "Huh." Thought that was just funny, but I then started being able to like hear conversations that were not happening in the house, and I've gotten to where I had to be very focused, and I can hear through walls or through buildings sometimes. And my eyesight has always been to where I can see really well. And so I always thought it was the wolf and never really said anything. And then we had a friend who was a massage therapist. I was in her little closet area where she worked in this bookstore, and she was working on me, and I get home and my mom goes, "Your massage therapist called." And I was like, "I didn't do anything. I don't know why she's calling. I paid. I didn't do anything wrong." And she goes, "No, she was calling because she was asking why she could hear conversations in the bookstore because she's never had that happen before." And we laughed and we said, "Oh, that's his wolf ears." So apparently I've had it transmute to her, and she was able to hear what I was hearing, and it was an interesting experience.
That is pretty amazing. And around what time in your age did it happen? You, s- you-
I think I was in my early 20s when that happened,
the
where she
reason,
could hear.
oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but the reason I asked that because we're gonna go back now because this is what why I asked. Going back to the age of 2 to the time of now, these experiences now in relation to me, this is not something that happens to me every day. It can go years in between, or it's been sometimes it's been about a decade in between. Then things happen, boom, boom, boom. Is that similar with you, or is this constantly happening throughout your life?
It's spaced out. So when I was 2, I had that experience. And then when I was preteen, I started having memories flood in and awareness of things that I never knew that I knew started coming in, like remembering things that never happened from what I understood. And that my parents were like, "Yeah, that never happened," but yet I have memory of it. So it always in the back of my mind, I was wondering, how do I have memories that aren't memories? And then in my late teens, I started, having shadow beings popping around and having fun experiences with them because I just figured they were just spirits. So just having fun, being aware of them. And then in my 20s, I had that experience and I started channeling a little bit and opening up to that experience. And then 30s is when I kind of got more into paranormal and investigating that style. And then in the 40s, where I'm at now, is kind of bringing it all together.
And henceforth, why now? You put a lot of these stories and experiences into the book, right?
I did. Some of them I like the experience with the massage therapist and the wolf. I didn't put in there, but I might put it in for the second edition of the book. I am, as much fun as it is, writing and you think you want to take a break. I have started jotting down notes of things that I want to add to the book. And so for everyone who's watching this, the book is out and it's a great bookmark of where I'm at now from beginning to today. And the second edition will have that material, maybe some more expansion on some of it, and added material. And so I'm looking at, I wanted to write a book to kind of share what I know with people. And so, like, my original intention was hosts like Diego could look at the book and go, hey, I've always wanted to talk about this type of experience. Let's go hit up Michael and see if he'll come on and talk about it. And it was a way of showing, there's more than just a few experiences, there's different types. And so you could pick and choose and have variety of shows. And then I was like, well, there's so many parts though to this that I think people might get lost in this versus that. And this is like a book unto itself. And so I pulled it out, made it its own book, broke up the original book into 4 parts. And when I was talking with my editor about it, she was reading the chapters and she's like, well, what are we calling this book? Because you don't really have a title. I was like, yeah, my title's a work in progress. I'm not too thrilled with it either. And she goes, well, let me toss around some ideas. And she came back with the image and says, Awakening, your journey into the paranormal. And I was like, I like that awakening, my journey of this. And then I was like, I look at the other parts of the book and I'm like, I could totally call those awakenings too. And so then I was like, hey, I'm going to call this all the Awakening series. And each book has its own awakening journey part to it. And so I'll share with you and your audience. The 4-book series is not in any order, but there is the paranormal journey that is available. There is a hidden discoveries of my past book that is also currently available. It was published in October. In November will be my metaphysical journey. And then in December, we're hoping, if everything stays on track, it'll just be my personal life journey. And so if you have all 4 books, you'll have a good idea of who I am and where I come from with how I think and process and why my shows are the way they do. And one of the things that I thought that I would do with the first 2 books is tell the story of the podcasts that go along with them. So the paranormal book has the origin story of the energy that surrounds us, my paranormal show. And also Paranormal Versus, which is a show that I co-host with Kel Ridley, and this season Enoch Smith joined us. And so I share the origins of Paranormal Versus as well. And I felt like that was like my nod to giving you exactly what my paranormal journey is, because it didn't end with investigations and then start with podcasting.
Mhm.
They kind of merged and were fluid into one. And so I was like, yeah, if I'm going to tell my paranormal journey, I got to tell the story of the podcast too. So I kind of added the origin stories there. And in the new book that I published this month in October, because we're recording this in October, is The Hidden Journeys. When I was writing the Hidden Discoveries, I was like, I don't have all the answers to write like a whole large novel about it, but I shared what I know currently. And I shared the podcast, Writing Through the Unknown's origins. And then I was like, well, this is my personal story, and, talking about hidden discoveries. Let me share some topics that are currently on my mind and why they are on my mind. And so there's a section at the end of the book where I'm like listing out, like, King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. And I don't list it out as being like, oh, who were they? Were they real? I look at it more of, okay, so we had these knights who represented this, but could they also have represented like signs of the zodiac? Could they be, star beings? Because we're being exposed to star races now. Could that have been what's going on? And so I do a deep dive and going, sharing what I'm looking at and how I'm looking at them, and like ley lines or the Nazca lines. And so topics like that, and sharing, my why it interests me, and how I can make it more than just the surface story that we hear. And so I thought that was a nice thing to add into the Hidden Discovery book, because it gives you an insight into how I process and think about things. So when I talk on the show, you might have a better idea of where some of my questions are coming from.
Right. So, touching on your shows, and how far back, when did you start them?
So in 2022, I was asked to do a podcast, and I accepted it after a 3-year gap between, 3-year gap between when I was originally asked. And I was co-hosting with a friend of mine, Carla, and we were just getting our feet wet for that show, and the title didn't work, and we kind of were like finding our groove. And so in 2023 is when the shows really took a life of their own. And so in 2023, in January, we revamped our show into the energy that surrounds us. And it's been running weekly since. And
Wow.
every once in a while, I'll throw in a special episode here or there. So you're not going to get 52 episodes a year of it. You might get 53, you might get 60. It depends on if I'm being tapped and feeling like, yeah, I really need to get this person on. Let's make a special episode for this and bring this on. And in June of 2023, my father passed away. And we always were into like esoteric stuff and hidden history and trying to bring light to that. And so I was sitting there one day and thought to myself, what could I do to pay homage to that part of our life and kind of like a tribute to him. And I was like, well, I do have, this podcast, but I can't throw together a podcast that fast. There's so much work to do to it. And I was like, well, you know what? In his name, I'm going to try. And so I launched in August, Writing Through the Unknown, with 3 of the planned 10 episodes scheduled. Then I scheduled a friend of mine who was the fourth episode to be scheduled. And I was sitting there like going, I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know if this is going to work, but I don't even have all the episodes, but it's too late now. We've already launched, so we'll just wing it, I guess. And before I knew it, I had, before the year was over, all 10 episodes. And a friend asked me if she could do something to help me understand something. And so we're like, yeah, let's do a special episode of it. And she did a reading for me about something. And so I was like, 11 episodes. And then 2024 rolls around and I'm like, okay, we're doing season 2 of The Energy That Surrounds Us. And I'm like, well, what do I do with Writing Through the Unknown? And I start laughing to myself and I go, I'm going to pull host prerogative. Season 2 of Writing Through the Unknown starting January. And I was like, I can make 11 episodes a season.
The platforms is available because I know you're on Rumble, right?
I'm on Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Spotify, a lot of platforms.
All right. Now, with the questions that I asked, because ultimately it's going to boil to something that I'm not ending the show quite yet, but I think it also going to make sense why I've kind of seemed to be all over the road, but there's a purpose for this. Now, from the age of 2, then your 20s, now you're a podcaster, a researcher, investigator, an author. How has your understanding of the paranormal evolved over the years from that first encounter at the age of 2 to today?
I would say it's evolved quite a bit, actually, because at the age of 2, I just thought it was a guardian angel that helped me. And then as my awareness of what's going on in the world around us, seen and unseen, grew, I was like, well, maybe that was an ET. And when I go and do investigations, we always talk about there being 3 types of spirits that you'll encounter. The intellectual, the one that's, the word's escaping me right now, but repetitive, going through the motions, so to speak. And then one that just making themselves known like an apparition. And I was like content with that. But then as started doing podcasting and more investigations, I started to think, what if some of these spirits that we think are spirits are actually, star races that are maybe reaching out to us and trying to ease into first contact by, meeting on a neutral ground in a neutral way and going, how will we be perceived? How will we be received? And also, I feel like, too, is an aspect that we don't think about is when we're looking and we're seeing in front of us someone walking by, and we think, oh, we just saw an apparition of a ghost from the 1700s walk by because of the way they're dressed. That could be a parallel Earth that's that's what they wear there, and we're seeing a parallel Earth because the veil is thinned there. So we're seeing another timeline in real time, and that's why there's no real interaction, because both of us don't know how to respond or communicate because this is so new. Or it could be different dimensions. And so it's like, wow, though, when we think we have an understanding of what we may be looking at, we realize we really honestly don't. There could be so many more options out there. And my goal is, in the hopes, for those watching my show, your show, and other thing, reading the books and everything, is to open their minds and going, maybe there is more than just here. And if there is, how can we help them come in here and help us elevate ourselves to a whole new world of thinking? Like, I think the best way to describe it is, instead of thinking I'm the only person here like me, we now think of ourselves as, hey, there are other people like me, so I'm not alone, to an even bigger level of, oh my gosh, I could think of myself on a galactic scale or multi-dimensional scale, and broaden our awareness. And so when and if that happens, we're more aware and accepting of it than going, the proverbial, if ET was to show up on your door, laugh and go, hey, yeah, that's a funny one. I knew you guys were going to prank me. And they're like, what are you talking about? And have this awkward first meeting.
And now, well, let's talk about in parallel universes. I've heard this theory many times, and I'm not sure because I haven't had the experience to know much about it. This may sound like a crazy question. Are they aware of us?
I don't think that's a crazy question. I think it's like I was saying earlier is, we see them, they see us, but we don't know what language they speak, or we don't even know if they use words. They may be telepathic over there in the parallel universe. So we're waiting to hear words, and they're trying to communicate telepathic, and we're not telepathic because we're not used to using that. And so we're using words, and it's getting lost in communication. And we could very well be, looking at each other and going, I don't know what I'm looking at because I can't communicate with it. So I don't know if this is an illusion or if this is a dream or if this is, a false memory and I'm just making something out of nothing.
I mean, no. Only because you're not the first person that I've heard this theory from. And the reason I asked earlier, I know you kind of repeated the answer, are they aware of us? And you're talking about that perhaps we're not speaking the same language as them. So let's just say this. I'm in West Virginia. There's an alternate Earth in West Virginia. Necessarily, they wouldn't have the same history or the same language as us here, right? Is that kind of along what we're going?
Well, so let's look at it this way. So, parallel world, let's just say hypothetically Nazi Germany won World War II. So West Virginia could be Nazi Germany now. So we would be speaking German there.
Oh.
Or it could be, Spain took over the world. So we're all speaking Spanish. Or the indigenous people won, and so we're all speaking indigenous over there. Or it could be even as simple as, the British ruled the world, but they're speaking proper British English where we're speaking American English, and you still have the communication gap because we're like trying to figure out, like, my favorite expression that points this out is, if I was to say to you, I'm pissing the night away, you're going to be like, man, you're in the bathroom all night? I'm like, yeah. But if you're in the UK and you say, I'm pissing the night away, that means you're in the pub drinking beer all night. Two totally different scenarios. So imagine
Right.
if, having that communication gap, talking to someone, even though both are English, they're not going to understand what you're saying and know how to respond because they're going to be confused, going, why are you talking about this when you're talking about that?
Got it. So now I have a better understanding. So we could simultaneously be living next to each other in a parallel universe, but certain events in history kind of split the tree a little bit on what we all would be doing in that universe.
Right.
And that kind of reminds me, I don't know if you remember this show back in the 80s. It might have been the 82, 83 called Voyagers.
I do remember that show.
And the purpose was, it was one time traveler traveling to the 80s, and somehow this kid got caught into it. And the kid was smart in history. So when, in that timeline, when history was going wrong, the kid's like, no. It needs to go like this. So that way we can jump to the next one. And I kind of think that's where you were going. So, no, I really appreciate that. Now, we're coming close to the end of the show, and I know that I want to talk about what you're going to be doing for the rest of this year and also in 2026. So what's next for you? I know you're working on other projects. Are you exploring new areas in the paranormal, and who do you got coming up on your shows?
So in the paranormal, I'm starting to investigate some new areas. And so one area is a haunted house that I'm a part of, Texas Scaregrounds in Mineral Wells. I'm getting used to and investigating the haunted house because it's a haunted warehouse. And I've had activity that I have not experienced before happening there. And so it's got my intrigue up, and it's kind of getting me back into full investigation mode. And I'm investigating with a friend of mine's team, North DFW Paranormal, and we're going to be going to a jail soon. And it's a location I've been to, but I'm learning more about it, and so I'm excited to be bringing that to the investigation and experience. And I have 2 books coming out in November, one in November and hopefully the other one in December, and I'll complete the Awakening series, the first editions of them, so they should hopefully be out by January, all 4. And so that'll be exciting. And guest coming up on my shows, I will say I don't remember names offhand because I've got so many shows coming up, but I do know I have like paranormal teams coming up. I have healing modalities that people are doing that are like amazing to me and I think need to be shared. Some mediums, some different, what I call the fringe paranormal topics that aren't your normal ghost hunting or haunted house location type shows. So I'm trying to bring out, and I may have some shows about near-death experiences and UFOs, and I might finally be getting a guest to come on and talk about black-eyed children.
Oh, wow.
I've been
Yeah.
trying to get one for that for like 2 seasons now, and so if I can figure that out. That'll be cool. And I will also say in January of 2026, I will be launching season 4 of both of my shows. And one of the things that I will share with your audience is I've heard people asking me, what are the show's going to be about, and I try not to script shows so they can be natural, but I've heard you guys, and so on the thumbnails, then season 4, I'm going to list on the bottom, there's a spot where I normally put the date and time, or not the day and time of the shows. Like it'll say Tuesdays at 9 or Wednesdays at 8. Now it'll have the topic where it's an idea of where we may be going. So I'm not necessarily going to hold to, scripting where the shows are going to go, but those are the topics will be what we hopefully plan on talking about. We may branch off and talk about other things, but yeah, that's what I have going on. And I am looking at doing a panel show for a part of what I'm learning in Writing Through the Unknown, and that is that there's a secret space program. So in December, I noticed that when you look up and try to find, people that are in the programs, you get a lot of the guys. And I have no issues with that, but I feel like it's balanced that there's male and females involved. But when I look at the panels and when I look at a lot of the conversations, shows, I see mostly men. And I feel like, why are the women getting, discounted or not featured as much? So last year, I did panels of the women of the SSP, as we call it. And I didn't do one for a while. And I was like, actually, I was at the conference in Florida talking to a few of the guests. And I was like, yeah, remember those panels that we were doing? And they were like, yeah, we really should do, that again and do another one. And so I'm hoping in December to be bringing back and having new faces on the panel and sharing their experiences. And so, yeah, I'm just keeping my eye on things that's going on and noticing, where I feel like certain topics may not be getting the coverage that I think that they need to be getting. And just taking a step back and going, so, I have a podcast show. What can I do about it? What can I shed some light on this and, or do a show about this and bring awareness to it? And so that's kind of becoming my goals now with the shows, is bringing awareness to aspects that people just may not be aware of because it's not mainstream. And so, yeah, I'm hoping to use my show just to help illuminate. And another thing that I started this year that I think is a really cool thing, and it doesn't take but a moment, but it's a really powerful thing, I think, to me. And that is at the end of the shows, no matter what my guest is doing, if it's a healing modality or sharing their experiences about something, I will thank them from my heart and from my show for sharing what they were their experiences with us. And I just think that's a really cool thing that I was like just started doing, and seeing that, yeah, it's a really powerful moment. And it wasn't started for any reason other than I just have gotten into a mode of just saying thank you to people for things. And it's like, I can't explain why I started it, but I'm glad I did.
Yeah, I'm glad you did too, man. And it's one of those things where people don't have to come on our shows and tell us their stories, but they choose to. And that in itself is a gift, because I don't know about you, and I'm pretty sure maybe you are, but each show that I do, each person that I interview kind of helps me get one step closer to at least trying to get an answer to some of these questions that I have. And I think shows like you do a tremendous job in bringing this to light. And I'd like to appreciate you being on Let's Find Out. And before we go, my friend, for the listeners that want to learn more about you, your books, and of course, we talked about it earlier, your podcast, where can they go find out?
Well, the truly easiest way is Diego has my Linktree that has every link in there you can find on any platform. My podcasts are on there. The links to my books are in there as well. And my website is linked in there. And that is really the easiest way. And if you're on Facebook, if you just look up Michael Kopf, you'll see my picture. That's me. And drop me a friend request if you want to follow along. And I can say, I'm not really big on the self-promoting aspect, and I'm sure, Diego, you're the same way. As I don't want to come off as being like that guy that's going to go, hey, you got to do this, this, and this. But I've kind of hit the moment where I realized, with the algorithms, we kind of really do need your guys' supports, because Diego and I, we can sit here and do these shows all day long and they're great for us. But if you're really enjoying them and want to see more of them, you gotta help us with the algorithms and click the like button, subscribe if you want to follow along, and leave us comments, because I personally respond to every comment that comes through when I see it. I'm not the best at checking for comments, but I promise as soon as I see it, I do respond. And it is me. I don't have anyone to respond for me. And so thank you to all the listeners and everybody, because we couldn't do really what we're doing without you. And so thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you for all the likes, shares, and follows and subscriptions. And the best part, doesn't cost them anything, and everything they do helps. Like you talk about the internet algorithms, it helps our show get promoted to other platforms, and it'll show on people's feed. Michael, I really appreciate you being a wonderful guest as always on the show, and let's get you back on in 2026, because I know that you'll have more things to talk about and probably another book by then.
Oh, I should have 4 books by then.
There you go. Thank you, my friend.
Copyright Diego the Podcaster. All content for Let's Find Out is the property of Diego the Podcaster and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, Diego the Podcaster, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out with Diego is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.